They are one of the most iconic parts of Middle-earth, the snarling, bloodthirsty foot soldiers of evil, the Orcs, created to serve Sauron, Morgoth, and every dark purpose in between. But once the ring is destroyed, once the great towers fall and the shadows scatter, what happens to them? More than that, what should happen? So today, we're diving deep into one of Tolkien's most uncomfortable questions. Can the Orcs of Middle-earth be redeemed? Let's look at this today.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
Behind every gnarled face and guttural war cry, there's a question Tolkien wrestled with for decades, one he never fully answered. Are orcs just monsters, born without souls and fit only for the sword? Or were they once something more? And if so, could they be saved? This wasn't just a fantasy dilemma for Tolkien, it became a philosophical, spiritual, and even a theological one. And in the end, it left one of the greatest moral knots in all of Middle-earth. To understand whether orcs can be redeemed, we first have to understand what they are. And this, like so much else in Tolkien's Legendarium, is anything but simple. You see, Tolkien revised the origin of the orcs multiple times throughout his life. In the Silmarillion, as edited and compiled by his son Christopher Tolkien, the dominant idea is that the first orcs were elves, captured, tortured, and corrupted by Morgoth in those deep dark places. They were twisted until they were no longer recognizable, and then bred into the monstrous armies we see later. That version is haunting, because it means the orcs aren't just monsters, they are fallen beings, immortal spirits corrupted beyond recognition. And if that's true, they would still carry the same inner spark as the elves, a soul, a fear, something capable, at least in theory, of choice, of remorse, and maybe even redemption. But Tolkien wasn't sure he liked this. In his letters and unpublished writings, he wrestled with the implications. Could a soul, however twisted, be beyond all hope? Would Ilúvatar allow such a thing to persist? Was Morgoth even capable of creating life, or did he only mar what was already there? Later ideas include orcs being made from corrupted men, or even beasts given mockery of speech and reason. And in Morgoth's Ring, one of the later volumes of the history of Middle-earth, Tolkien seems increasingly uncomfortable with the idea that orcs could have souls at all, especially if that would make them morally responsible for their actions. So, are they fallen elves, corrupted men, creatures without souls at all? Tolkien gave no final answer, but each version changes the stakes, because if orcs are merely beasts in the shape of men, then there's no redemption to be had. But if they were once something more, if there's still a glimmer of that original soul inside, then the question becomes a whole lot harder to answer. Now this is where things do get really tricky, because at the heart of the orc redemption debate is that giant question of did orcs have souls? Tolkien often refers to the Fëa, the immortal soul that the elves and men were gifted by Ilúvatar, the One. The Valar, even Melkor himself, could not create a soul. They could twist, corrupt, mutilate, but they could not truly make something new. Only Ilúvatar could. So, if orcs were truly independent beings with reason, intelligence, language, then logically they must have Fëa. Which leads us to a problem, because that would mean orcs are moral beings, capable of choice. And if they're capable of choice, then they must also be capable of redemption, of good deeds, even if they are rare. And this made Tolkien just uncomfortable. In Morgoth's Ring, he writes, "It is a serious matter to be considered whether any rational incarnate creature could be wholly evil." See, he recognized that if orcs were truly rational, that they could not be irredeemably evil. But he also didn't want a world where orcs were going out to Sunday school and turning over new leaves. That just didn't sit right with the moral fabric of his world. To try and resolve this tension, Tolkien began writing alternative ideas. Maybe the orcs didn't have souls. Maybe they were like parrots, mimicking speech without true understanding. Maybe they were closer to beasts, animated by the will of their master, more like puppets. He even wrote, "They would be beasts of humanized shape to mock men and elves." In this version, orcs don't have free will. They don't have souls. They are slaves in every sense. Biological machines, corrupted so deeply they've lost even the spark of Ilúvatar's gift. But here's the twist. Tolkien never settled on one final answer. Even late in life, he wrote versions where some orcs may have been corrupted men who absolutely would have souls. And so the problem remained. Either orcs are just beasts, utterly dominated and soulless, or they are fallen beings, tragic figures trapped in a cycle of violence, and maybe, just maybe, capable of being saved. So, if Tolkien left the question of orc souls and free will unresolved in his letters and essays, what do the stories themselves actually show us? Because while the lore might leave room for debate, the narratives within The Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion, The Hobbit, they do paint a consistent picture of how orcs behave, how they're treated by others, and what that might imply. Let's start with the obvious. Orcs speak. They argue. They make jokes, they show fear, they have frustrations, they even use sarcasm. They express loyalty, ambition, even cowardice. Look at Shagrat and Gorbak, for instance. They aren't just faceless goons. Their conversation in the Tower of Cirith Ungol reveals something remarkable. They are self-aware. They wonder what's going on in Mordor. They talk about surviving the war, maybe even escaping to live on their own terms. These aren't just mindless beasts. They're cynical, tired soldiers hoping to stay alive. And that's a huge clue. Even in The Hobbit we get similar behaviour. The goblins under the Misty Mountains sing, plot, negotiate. Some are smarter than others, but again, we see distinct personalities, not drones. So does this suggest full sentience? Well, if yes, that would imply moral accountability, and that's where it gets tricky again. Because almost no orc in Tolkien stories is shown to make a selfless or morally good choice. We don't see one turn from evil or seek to better themselves. There's no orc version of Boromir, falling and then redeeming themselves. No Gollum-style character torn between darkness and light. And that's telling. But that doesn't mean they couldn't. The truth is, we're never given the chance to see what would happen if an orc tried to be free. Frodo famously shows pity towards Gollum. Gandalf believes that even Gollum has a part to play in the larger plan. But no one at any point extends that same mercy to an orc. In fact, when Sam wonders aloud if they're really all just born evil, Frodo gives a brief reply. It's a sad thought. And then the story moves on. So the narrative lens never gives us the orc's side, not really. And that might be the most Tolkienian answer of all. Because Tolkien believed in pity, in hope, in the idea that even the worst among us could choose a different path. But he also understood that cycles of fear and domination can crush that possibility before it even begins. In other words, orcs might be redeemable, but they're never given the chance to try. Tolkien's orcs are more than just sword fodder for heroes. They are monsters, yes, but they also serve as a mirror, a warped reflection of the other peoples of Middle-earth, and a lens through which we can see the themes of corruption, morality, and power from a darker angle. Take the Elves, for instance. If we accept the theory Tolkien floated that orcs were twisted elves, corrupted by Morgoth, then they represent the ultimate perversion of the purest beings in Arda. Elves are immortal, wise, lovers of beauty and light. Orcs? They're stunted mockeries, full of hate, feeding off destruction. It's a reversal, and a deliberate one, and one that makes the horror of their fate all the more tragic. But it's not just elves, there's a darker mirroring of men too. Tolkien once described orcs as morally irredeemable, yet still driven by fear, cunning, and the need for hierarchy. In short, they are human-like in all the worst ways. They complain, they scheme, they serve under tyrants and grumble about it. They aren't soulless machines, they're twisted shadows of men under the weight of domination and fear. And then there's Morgoth, Sauron, Saruman, the Masters. In how they treat the orcs, we get a chilling insight into how evil operates in Middle-earth. Orcs are used, discarded, bred for war, and broken for obedience. There's no loyalty, no love, just utility. They are slaves without chains, bound by terror and domination. And this too is the point. The orcs are a product of their makers, twisted by dark powers and kept in line not through belief or vision, but through brutal control. It's a grim truth, but an important one. The orcs might be monsters, but they didn't make themselves. In them, Tolkien gives us a cautionary tale about what happens when fear replaces freedom, and domination becomes the only law. So, there we have it. After all that, where do we actually land? Can orcs be redeemed? Well, the answer might not be as neat and tidy as we'd like. In the world of Middle-earth, Tolkien presents a complex tapestry of good and evil, but when it comes to orcs, even he couldn't give us a final answer. And maybe that's just kind of the point. On one hand, we have examples of orcs showing signs of thoughtfulness, maybe hesitation, even a dark kind of camaraderie. These moments hint at something more than just blind obedience or demonic instinct. They suggest that deep down, there could be something salvageable, something human. But on the other hand, Tolkien's own writings constantly pull back from that idea, whether it's the corrupted elves theory, the soulless beast suggestion, or his late-in-life attempts to rewrite the lore entirely. It's clear that he never really fully comfortably granted the orcs true moral agency. After all, if they could be redeemed, then what does that say about how they're treated by the heroes? At the heart of this question, there is really a bigger one. Can evil be inherent? Can a creature be born beyond saving? Tolkien wrestled with that idea for decades, and his discomfort may be a reflection of our own modern questions about morality, war, and the nature of free will. So, are orcs redeemable? If you ask the books, the answer is unclear. If you ask the movies, probably not. But if you ask the reader, that is where it gets interesting. Because like much of Tolkien's work, the deeper truths of Middle-earth are not always handed to us. Sometimes they're left for us to ponder, to discuss over a pint down the Green Dragon, long after the last page has turned. But now it is your turn. Tell me what you believe. Do you think orcs were capable of redemption, or were they truly beyond saving, doomed from the moment they were corrupted? Share your thoughts and opinions on this in the comment section down below. And along with this, if you would like to support the channel in other ways, please consider our Patreon. You can't always rely on YouTube itself, so this extra support will really help the channel stay strong and keep us getting that content out for you. But with that, thank you for spending just some of your time with me today, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.